Hello everyone and welcome to Life in a Bubble with me, Oliver Dingley. This is the podcast where we get deep and personal to some of Ireland's most talented people as they share some of their most significant moments. So today's guest on Life in a Bubble is a camoige superstar, broadcaster and columnist. Since amassing numerous accolades in the sporting world, our guest has become a well-known face on Irish TV. She even danced her way to the 2018 final of Dancing with the Stars. So today's guest is the fantastic Anna Geary. Anna, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much, Oliver, for inviting me.
Now, it's weird for me because I feel like I know you because I see you on TV all the time. I listen to your radio show on a weekly basis. And I actually watched an episode of Ireland's Fittest family recently.
Oh, really?
And I know your background is a sporty background. How competitive do you get on that show?
Oh, you know what? Believe everything you see on Ireland's Fittest family. I am as competitive as all the other coaches are. I think for us, because just to give people a bit of context, we're filming for maybe 12, 14 hours a day. You're mic'd up for the entire time. And I suppose as for sports people where sport is our background, you know, you very quickly forget about the TV cameras and the mics when it's competition, because ultimately you are there with your family competing in something, and you know, one family might go through, one might go home. So you want your family to win. You want to win. So we do get very animated. We get very passionate. There is rivalries that exist between the coaches.
Who's the most competitive out of you all?
Oh, that's a very difficult one, because I think we're all extremely competitive. I would say Davy Fitzgerald is probably the most animated. Davy wears his heart on his sleeve and he's a wonderful character and wonderful sports person, but he just wants it so much. Like when his family wins, he would be nearly doing cartwheels. When his family loses, he would be down on the ground banging his fist off the sod. And I think entertainment wise, people love that, you know, because
it's a character.
It's real and it's raw and it's authentic. And often we see now managers, particularly in sport, where they're on the sidelines in their suits and you get very little reaction off them. You get very little emotion. And I think it's a lost art, personally. I think it's, you know, I know sometimes people might say that Davy might be a bit too animated, but he shows how badly he wants it. And I think there's something really endearing about that. I think that's why he's loved in Ireland's Fittest family more than any other coach. You know, we're all kidding ourselves. Davy's probably the favourite in everybody's home.
You're all fantastic. And I agree, actually, in sport in general. You look at soccer, some of the press conferences afterwards, just the constant avoidance.
Often I think with the likes of Davy, I think there's method in their madness, because by taking the focus off the players and placing the focus on themselves, it's almost, you know, it's taking the spotlight off the players, it's taking the pressure off, it's particularly if there's been a bad performance or a loss. And then the headlines the next day are about them as opposed to their players. Now, it often means that they have to take a bit of a hammering, you know, in the public eye. But often it's for the team's best interests, you know. And I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that sport is meant to be entertainment. I think, you know, don't get me wrong, I'm very serious about my sport. I always was about camogie, but I do think we need to sometimes be reminded that it's not life or death. It is entertainment, and you know, sometimes it's good to be able to laugh about something, and it's good. And I think what happens now is, and I suppose having been a player for so long and having done interviews and now being on the other side of the mic where you're the interviewer trying to extract a good story or a good answer, and not in any way, you know, to get a sensational headline or to make a player say something that they'd regret, but it's just more to say something real, say how they really feel. The managers nearly stop that now. They stop that real answering of questions, that they're, you know, you almost, these learned off lines come out of players, and it is a protection mechanism, because, you know, I suppose managers are very conscious that they don't want their players in the papers the next day, you know, giving ammunition to the opposition, going, oh, well, this person said that, you know, they're the best team in the competition. They obviously think that, you know, we're not good, so we'll show them. And I suppose that's sometimes where media can twist words, and they can twist what people say. So I think there's a responsibility on both sides of a microphone to bring a little bit of realness. And I think, you know, players and managers alike in sport would probably be a bit more honest with media if they felt there was a trust there.
Yeah, felt comfortable.
Yeah, and I think there has to be a trust there, and I think that's one of the things that I like to bring now when I work on, as I said, the other side of the microphone, working in the media, whether it's as a pitch side reporter or if you're interviewing somebody on our sports show Pumped Up Kicks on Today FM. Shameless plug there.
It's a great show.
Yeah.
I'd watch it. I'd listen to it
but it's lovely because what we try and do is we let people speak. We don't try them back them into a corner. I would always be very aware of the fact that when I was a player, I wanted to be interviewed by somebody that didn't want to back me into a corner or say something, force me to say something that could be taken out of context. The trust came from when you knew that person wanted, you to walk away happy from that interview and that there wouldn't be any repercussions afterwards with your manager or with whoever. And I suppose I always bear that in mind, having been a player for so long, that when I'm interviewing players or managers, whoever it is, I'm aware of the trust in that relationship that still needs to be intact when you walk away, because that to me is really important. And I think, we had Sonia Sullivan, we interviewed her a few weeks ago. Like, Sonia's an icon in the world of Irish sport in general. It doesn't just have to be in athletics. And I met her at the RTE Sports Awards before Christmas. And I was trying to encourage Shane Lowry to come on and speak with us in 2020, because obviously Shane is such a wonderful character and sports person. And Sonia was there at the same time, and Sonia turned around to him and said, I really enjoyed my chat with Dec and Anna, and it was really relaxed, and they allowed me to speak, and their questions were very general and open. I mean, that was one of the greatest compliments that could be given to me, because that was specifically what I tried to do. I think sometimes, journalists have their role. They have to ask the hard questions sometimes, and sometimes if there's a scandal or something to be uncovered, those questions sometimes are harsh and they do need to get the answers. But you don't need to be like that all the time, and I think that's where, the trust can sometimes be broken down between two people when there's a microphone in the middle. They do need to understand your reasoning, and often if I could give a little bit of a tip to someone, look, I have to ask you this question, I'm giving you a heads up now, you've got 30 seconds to answer it. Again, it's just, there's a little bit of leeway, and I would look to the likes of, we'll say, Jackie Hurley in sports broadcasting, Marty Morrissey, who have a fabulous relationship with the people they interview, and I've tried to emulate that. And I think, I've loads to learn, but I think having that advantage of having been a player, sometimes it's good to be able to put yourself in the other person's shoes.
You've had the bug for coaching on Ireland's Fittest Family. Would you go into coaching camogie?
It's been asked of me. I'm not prepared to fully retire from camogie in playing terms, and I don't think I would have the capacity to be one of these, player managers. But I think down the line,
like hard work.
I don't know how people do it. Like, what? I really have admiration for somebody that can compartmentalise and be a player and a manager. But it's something I suppose I would be interested in. I don't know would I be any good at it. I do think that not every top class player or not every player is a good manager, and equally you'll see some managers, they've never made it as a player, but that doesn't mean that they're not a brilliant manager. So I think I'd probably need to dip my toe into it in some way and see if I was any good. I think I would probably be the exact same as a manager as I am a player, in that if I'm giving something my commitment, I'm giving it 100% commitment. And I suppose at the moment when you're self-employed and you're working like that, Ireland's Fittest Family, and you're all over the country working very unorthodox hours, it's very difficult to give that commitment. So I would like to think that if I was in that position down the line, it would be something I would love to dip my toe into. I think in Ireland's Fittest Family, the greatest challenge for me is being on the sideline, because you can work with your family, you can give them advice, or you can help them through something, you can talk tactics, but you're kind of helpless when it's ready, steady, go, because you can't do anything. And I've been at times, you've nearly been tempted to run in and just give them a little bit of a lift over the wall, and you can't do that. And I think that is it's a very challenging aspect of management, particularly if you were a player, because when you're a player you have the opportunity to take some control or some ownership or some accountability of the outcome. But when you're a manager, you can talk all you want, but ultimately the action has to come from the people that you're managing. And I think, again, there has to be a great trust, but also you have to stay as calm as possible. And as people see in Ireland's Fittest Family, sometimes I'm not the calmest person. So patience, they say, is a virtue. So that's something I'd have to work on that, I'm sure.
No, it's hard. I always feel most sorry for parents kind of sitting there in the stands and just being so helpless and willing you to do so well. And Oh, I wouldn't envy
Poor
that upon
referees
anyone.
as well at times. I have to say that now, because
imagine.
sometimes people get, very animated and passionate on the sidelines, and sometimes they get the brunt of it. It's like, my Johnny didn't hit. What is he saying? He doesn't know what he's talking about. It's a difficult job to be a referee. I'd probably be a manager before I'd be a referee. I'd put it to you like that.
I wouldn't envy those, especially you look at your soccer referees.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus, they get a bad deal.
And GA referees, because the speed of the game now has increased so much. It's a lot of ground for one person to cover, and I suppose it's something that I personally have been in favour in for quite a while, as I think there should be 2 referees on a pitch, because if you think a puck out of a slitter, the speed of a ball, I mean, unless you're Usain Bolt, you are not getting to, to be where the ball lands. Yeah, I think it is quite a difficult job, and it's I suppose for me, good refereeing, and I'm going on a tangent here for a second, but it's so important. Any refereeing is so important to the game that they're refereeing, and really top quality standard refereeing is really important. So you have to have good, competent people in those jobs, and unless we make refereeing a little bit more enticing, a little bit more attractive, well then we're not going to encourage younger people to get into the world of refereeing. And I think making their job a little bit easier is really important. They have so much to do, especially GA referees. They're trying to take the time, they're trying to watch off the ball incidents, they're trying to watch the flight of the ball. I think having 2 would probably help that situation. So
me and my multitasking would seriously get stuck.
I've learned
right
to be a
there.
good multitasker, thankfully, down to the years when I was in Leaving Cert. That was actually the very first year back, all the way back in 2005, when I started on the Cork Senior Camogie team for the first time. So multitasking and time management became something I had to really focus on, because I would come home from school at 4:30. I'd be in the car for training. At 5:30 in Cork City, we'd arrive at 7 o'clock, train for 2 hours, get back into the car home by maybe about 11, doing that maybe 3 times a week during your Leaving Cert year when you're also trying to study.
Fairly action-packed then.
Yeah, but again, you learn to manage your time, and you learn. It's like when I would say to people, nowadays we're in a world where everything is busy and people are always saying, I don't have the time. It's like, do you not have the time, or do you just not want to make the time? Because there is a big difference. Like when people say about exercise, I just don't have the time to exercise. And I say, right, okay, well, if you break down your day, do you have time to scroll, for example, on Instagram and social media?
Too much time.
It's like, well, if you've time, my mentality is if you've time to scroll, you've time to sweat. And even if you ease yourself in, maybe, if you're scrolling, maybe you're doing it on a stationary bike in a gym, or, something like that, whereas it's easy to get your exercise in, and then you'll actually find the benefits of exercise will be so much better than the scrolling is. But I think we all have to make time, I think, in our lives, and I think sport has really helped me to understand that time management,
Definitely, and camogie, I guess, is where the heart lies for you. So that leads us on to our first photo.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so my first photo is when I was captain of the Cork Under-16 team, all the way back in 2003, and we won the All-Ireland. We beat Galway, and that same month, it was in August, and that same month I was invited onto the Cork Senior Camogie panel to be a member of the panel, and it was like a dream come true, because I've been playing camogie since I was 5 years old, and to be honest about it, I had been a very average camogie player, and actually, to be honest, saying I was average is paying me a compliment. I was average until I was about 12 or 13. I think I was nervous. I kind of lacked maybe a little bit of belief in myself, and that wasn't from a lack of encouragement from my trainers and parents. They were all brilliant, but I was nearly afraid to make mistakes. Whereas we went into secondary school, and I had really, really encouraging coaches in secondary school as well. We're like, who cares if you make a mistake? Everybody makes mistakes. It's just about how you deal with that mistake. So I started developing that mentality, and it really just completely springboarded me into a completely different level, playing camogie. And I was 12 years old on the under-16 camogie team, 13 years old on the under-18 camogie team, and then having just turned 16 in July, and all of a sudden being catapulted into the world of senior inter-county camogie was, even now I think, wow, really? They wanted me? And now, I was sitting in a dressing room with girls that were my heroes. I was never going to play a part in the 2003 campaign, but even to be there, even to see how they worked and how diligent they were, and their preparation and pucking around with them, it was a dream come true. And I think it really, for me, it taught me a lot about working towards something you're passionate about. Camogie had always been my passion up to that point, but I think when I hit the Cork Senior Inter-County team, I realised being good enough or being talented enough isn't enough. You have to have the work ethic to match. You have to be willing to do things that your opposition won't do. You know, you have to be prepared to do things and put the time in that people won't see bar you. And it taught me a lot that my confidence comes from my preparation. So the more diligent I was with my preparation, the better I actually performed. And I've actually used that life lesson in every aspect of my life. I used it in college. I used it in my work career, when I graduated from college and got my first job in the height of the economic recession. I then had to use it when I decided after 7 years to pack my job in and just become self-employed. But it definitely was. It was a phrase that a manager in secondary school said to me was, hard work will beat talent if talent doesn't work hard. And I think it's work ethic is everything. And I learned it when I transitioned from being Cork under-16 captain to senior.
And did that come natural to you, or did it take a while to kind of, you move from, I mean, this is not just a small step, this is a huge progression into what is a very professional outlet of people.
And I suppose in an adult world as well, you know, because up until that point you were only playing with your peers. I think it did come naturally to me, albeit there was loads of frustration. You know, I'm the type of person that if I want to do something well, I want to do it now. You know, like, okay, you have to have that interim period where you have the progress and the improving. And I suppose the element of frustration has never left me, that I always kind of want to be really good at something straight away.
It's always good when it goes right, though.
It is. And I suppose the competitor in me always perseveres. You know what? My dad is a very competitive person, and I can thank him for my competitive spirit, that, you know, all the way back to my early days when I first started playing sport, we'd go out the back and we had a game, hit the drain pipe, much to my mother's horror, because we cracked that drain pipe a good few times. And he was like, you know, hit the drain pipe. And, you know, I used to do cross country when I was younger, and when I was training and I'd run back the fields because we grew up on a farm, my dad would run with me and nearly took personal satisfaction from beating me, you know, but it was like, come on, catch me, you know, constantly pushing me outside my comfort zone. So I think the competitor in me always knew that, you know, strive to be better, you know, strive to be the best you can be, strive to fulfill your potential. So it allowed me then, when I was, I suppose, in an environment where people were pushing themselves all the time, it almost rubs off on you. And that's why I would be a firm believer now in my role as a performance coach, is surround yourself with people that you want to be like. If you want to be a really, you know, hardworking, positive, supportive person, well, surround yourself with those people. And I was completely immersed in that environment, so I suppose it was always impossible for me to not push myself to be better.
So photo number 2 for me, the one I've picked, is a picture of you 11 years later, winning and holding up the trophy after an All-Ireland final.
Yeah, it was probably the culmination of years of hard work, and it's still, I actually have tingles, would you believe, even looking at the picture, because it's me lifting the O'Duffy Cup over my head in front of the Hogan stand, having climbed the steps and lifted the cup as captain of the Cork camoige team. It was an epic final against Kilkenny. We were 5 points down at half time, and for us to come back was extraordinary. But I think as well, that was a dream come true, because for anybody, you know, that's part of a team, to be captain of that team and to lift the cup, you know, and win the All-Ireland final and be the greatest team in Ireland was, you know, it was what people only dream of. And there's so many fantastic sports people that have entered and left Croke Park without ever saying they could do that, you know. And for me to have done it with a group of girls I'd played with, a lot of them actually back since the early 2000s, it was, you know, they were friends, they weren't just teammates. And, you know, a lot of us were coming towards the latter stages of our careers, and to have won was extraordinary, and to have lifted that cup in front of a sea of blue and white, it was quite surreal, I think, considering that, like you said, 11 years previous I was coming from quite humble beginnings, you know, even going back maybe 15 years to, like, you know, previous, I was a very, you know, timid kind of young camogie player that probably had, like any other person, had a lot of self-doubt and lacking in belief. So to have got to that point was quite extraordinary. And I suppose it was just a reminder to me as well that it's about perseverance. It's about, you know, working towards something. And we'd lost more All-Irelands than I'd won at that stage, but it doesn't stop you. Like, every year you have to go again. And I suppose any sports person or anyone that wants something will tell you that you're not going to succeed the first, second, third, maybe even the 50th time you try, but it's about always going and keeping going and kind of never giving up. And that All-Ireland final was really a testament to that even though we were 5 points down, we never gave up, and we dragged and we clawed our way back into that final.
It's the most fantastic photo. And for any international listeners for this, how would you describe Croke Park? Because in Ireland, it's such a huge place. I mean, My first experience of going to Croke Park was actually to go watch the Script, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah.
but I've been to a few games there as well, and it's the most amazing arena. So
It is.
to stand on that field.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Croke Park, it's the theatre of dreams. Dreams can be made there, or dreams can be shattered there. So it can be the best place in the world, but it can also be the loneliest place in the world. Like, I stood in Croke Park back in 2007. We lost to Wexford in the All-Ireland final, and I can still remember feeling heartbroken. I really was. It was crushing. The game hadn't gone our way from the start. We hadn't performed as well, and it really, I don't know why, because when it's a team sport, the beauty is that you get to share in the victory, but you also get to share the defeat. So it's not, the blame often doesn't rest on just one person. You can be really disappointed in yourself and feel you've underperformed, but everyone's kind of in it together. But I felt a real sense of disappointment in myself that day, and it really had a heavy impact on me, I think, to the point actually where back 2007 I actually took the year out in 2008 and took an opportunity with my college, the University of Limerick, to go abroad and do a work placement abroad. So, and I kind of, because I needed to ignite that passion back for camogie, and I did, and thankfully I went on to lift the cup a few years later. But it's just Croke Park, you just look around, and now obviously, there was only 30,000 people that day, and you can, yeah, exactly. But when you think about an All-Ireland hurling day, there's 83,000 people, and it's packed to the rafters. But even at that, with 30,000, the noise levels were insane. You couldn't hear your teammates standing 10 feet away from you on the pitch, so everybody had to be really clear of their job. Like, we went through even the ritual of, and thankfully a lot of the girls, we'd been through it loads of times before, of getting on the bus, the Garda escort taking you through Dublin to Croke Park, everybody beeping and waving when they see it's the Cork Camogie team and they've their flags out, and you drive down Jones's Road and there's a sea of red and white, and suddenly that for me was always when, wow, okay, this is, it's All-Ireland final day, this is becoming real. Because for me, with Cork, the only time you got to play in Croke Park was All-Ireland final day. So, and you really had to familiarise yourself with the different type of build-up than you would have had to any other game. And it was as much about your mental preparation for the All-Ireland final as it was about your physical. Probably even a bit more, because you had to take the extra pressure. You had to be able to cope with, what'll happen if this doesn't go right, or if we get delayed in traffic, or whatever it is. So you kind of had to maybe mentally steel yourself a bit. But like you said, the reward then is just incredible. It's a feeling of elation. And when I look at that picture you're holding up of me, I think I've entitled that caption before on my Instagram, "Happiness is," because the smile on my face, it's of one of sheer joy. And anytime I look at that picture, it always brings me back.
I got goosebumps just listening to that. And so from 2007 to 2014, you'd have been 27 when that photo was taken.
Yeah.
And you, in a way, you'd have played a different role in that team. You were a bit more of a senior player and also the captain. Yeah,
so I came onto the panel back in 2003, got my first start in my Leaving Cert year in 2005. We lost the All-Ireland in 2003 and 2004, and then thankfully won it in 5 and 6. Lost, like I said, to Wexford in 2007. I was out in 2008 over in Luxembourg and came back in 2009. And from the time of 2009 to 2010, we won the All-Ireland in 2009, but then we lost the semi-final in 10 and 11, lost the All-Ireland final in 12. I was captain in 2013. We lost the All-Ireland semi-final by a point. So then to get to that point, we hadn't won an All-Ireland in 5 years. And as captain, like you said, your role changes because you've newer players in the panel. You have to do things more than just about yourself. You have to make sure that they're integrating well and they're happy. And so even in 2014, it was even tougher again, because the manager had asked me to play in a position I'd never played in before. In my 20 odd years of playing camogie, they asked me to play full back, and I had been a wing back. Number 7 or number 6 was the jersey I would have worn. And so that's much more, free flowing role. It's much more in the thick of the action. You've a lot more running. Whereas fullback, you have to be much more disciplined, much more concentrating. You mightn't get half the amount of ball, but you have to make sure when you do, like, you're protecting the goalkeeper. And it was very challenging. It was a very challenging year for me, to be honest, as a sports person, because I was playing in a position I'd never played before. I didn't have time to transition into that role, so I knew I wasn't performing at the best level that I could perform at, but it was necessary for the team. So I almost had to sacrifice my own game for the good of the team. And it's very hard for any sports person or anyone in general coming off after a competition knowing that you didn't play to the level you could. But I didn't have enough experience to full back. Now, look, ultimately I used to tell myself, but you'll get the greatest reward if this works out. You'll get the chance to lift the cup. And ironically, back in 2014, and a lot of people may not even know this, in the quarter-final against Offaly, I broke my hand. So I broke my hand in the quarter, got a belt and broke the bone down my middle finger, that bone there, and was actually in the same year was the Cork Rose. So we had a few weeks of a break to the All-Ireland semi-final, and during that time then I went back to Tralee as the Cork Rose, knowing I had a cracked bone in my hand, so I wasn't able to train anyway. Now I actually still trained back. I used to get up at 5:30 every third morning, and a selector of ours in the Cork panel was actually back. He had a holiday house in Tralee, so he was come and train me, and had a broken hand, had obviously, like anything, when you break something there's severe bruising.
I'd say it fairly hurts.
So it did. Now I didn't tell anybody because I was like, we can't let we were actually playing Wexford, would you believe it or not, our arch rivals in the All-Ireland semi, and I was like, I can't tell anyone it's broken because I don't want anyone to know. I don't want them to know it's broken. So I kind of hid it from everybody, and my mum to this day always jokes that when I was standing on stage with Dahi O'Shea, I had probably the most ladylike stance I've ever had in my entire life in an interview, because I had my right hand placed very strategically over my left, and I was standing there because I can't show people the bruise in my hand. And we played the All-Ireland semi-final 10 days later. A few of my teammates knew that it was broken. Now I suppose I had a big decision to make, as did the manager, that I had to make sure that I wasn't going to be a liability to the team by playing. But I had been able to catch ball, obviously with pain, but it wasn't like my wrist was broken. It was just a bone in the hand. So we strapped it up and I played the game. I played quite a good game actually. I was on one of their best players, and I think, nearly I had this adrenaline rush that I was like, you're so close now to getting to the All-Ireland final. You've, sacrificed like so much. You just, go for it. And we got to the All-Ireland final, and like that, my hand was right for All-Ireland final day. So when I think back, I'm like, yeah, it probably, again, mentally, it just steals you. And loads of people play with injuries. It's loads of people perform with injuries. You just, it's the mentality. You strap it up and you go until a point where you can't go anymore. So yeah, thankfully it worked out. But it's always funny that I can look back now, and every time I ever see that interview with Dahi, I can see me covering my hand. So I'm like, oh, I remember that. Actually, the only person that knew was the escort back in the Rose Tralee. He was a physio at the time.
Oh, okay.
So he spotted it straight away, but he kept my secret.
Well, you are some person. And that photo is testament to where you wanted to get with a group of people who you grew up with as well, which is absolutely fantastic.
It was and it was great fun ultimately.
So, photo number 2.
So the photo I've chosen is quite a recent photo, but it's one that always makes me smile. It's of the crew in Ireland's Fittest family. So it's the 4 coaches and the presenter Mairead Ronan, and we are all jumping up in the air with just silly faces. We're pulling loads of different expressions, because I suppose for me, Ireland's Fittest family it's a really powerful and positive show. I think it reminds people that exercise and movement and activity is meant to be fun, and you can get so much enjoyment out of it. And I think it's one of the few shows in Irish television where whether you're 6, 16 or 60, you can sit down and watch it and take something from it. And it's lovely for families to be able to watch it together, because that doesn't really happen that often. And I think for me, when I look at this picture, I think about like the fun that we have in the show, but I also think about like my career, and that I want my career to have some fun in it. Because when I tell people, even as a performance coach, to break down your day, when people say, oh, I'm really struggling to, find joy in different aspects of my life, or I'm really struggling to make time for different things. And when you break down your day, you're probably at work more than you are doing any other thing, including sleeping. So you have to make sure that what you're doing in work has some element of joy and some element of fun. And as well, that's why I'm very lucky and privileged to be a part of that show, because it brings so much fun and enjoyment into my life. And I think it reminds me as well to make sure I have that fun in my career, because look, with all of our jobs, no matter what you do, there's always going to be aspects of your job you don't like. That's always going to happen. And there's going to be days where you just don't want to be there. You just want to be back in your bed with the duvet watching movies. But you have to have more good days than bad. And, I'm thankful that for 7 years I worked in a corporate environment, and while I liked what I did, I didn't feel it was something I loved doing. I didn't feel I had a passion for it. So back in 2015 I made a few big decisions in the space of a few weeks. I retired as Cork captain and Cork camoige player. I left my job in the corporate world and I decided to move to Dublin. So, you know, it was probably some sort of late 20s crisis I possibly was having, but it allowed me then to kind of go on a bit of an adventure with my own career. And I was very fortunate. I didn't have any financial responsibilities in terms of I didn't have a mortgage or didn't have children to be worrying about. So I am aware that I was quite lucky and fortunate. But I wanted to try things that possibly I loved. And I suppose from my time playing camogie, I'd always loved working in the world of media, and I also had loved sports psychology. So I had gone back to qualify as a performance and lifestyle coach, because I love that idea that, you know, no matter how good you're doing something, you know, your mind can always help you to be a little bit better. And it's about understanding, you know, even what you stand for and what your values are. And I think ironically, I started the lifestyle coaching in the start of 2015, and it made me answer a lot of hard questions. So I probably hadn't answered these questions before, because everyone thinks they know what they stand for. And you know, if somebody said to you, what are your values? Oh yeah, I know them, but could you write them down on paper? And I couldn't. I really struggled with it. So it made me start to think about what I wanted out of my life. And I suppose camogie had been the centre of my life up until that point. Everything else revolved around it. Relationships, friendships, college, work. I built my life to suit my camogie. And I suppose I got to the stage where I started gaining and growing a curiosity about my own career, saying, oh, you know, I wonder what it would be like if I could do something different. And I'd love to have the same passion for my career as I have for camogie, because, you know, camogie, as fabulous as it is, has only a shelf life for me, and there was only so long I could continue to play at the top level. And I didn't want it to turn around and be in a situation where camogie was the main passion of my life, and then when that was gone, what else did I have? So I suppose I started exploring pastures new. And one of the very first jobs that I got when I left my career and when I retired from Cork, was to be a coach in Ireland's Fittest family 5 years ago. And also Marty Morrissey, who's a great pal of mine, asked me would I get involved in his show on Radio 1 on Sunday evenings, talking about sport. So, you know, I suppose it ignited a passion within me, and I was like, I love working with people. I love the dynamic that comes from working with people. I love I suppose in media, no 2 days are the same. You have to, I suppose it's very much like sport as well, from the point of view that you have to be able to cope with changing circumstances. And thankfully I've been very grateful to have had work ever since.
And that leads me on to my second photo,
yes,
which is, you spoke earlier about interviewing and the skills it takes, and you went from a sports environment into a whole new different environment we've just been speaking about. So this photo is of you on the sideline of the pitch. Okay,
yes, yeah, one of my first jobs. It was actually one of the first jobs I've ever had as pitchside reporter. It was with Air Sport, and I was reporting on the National Hurling and Football League, and I was, you know, very inexperienced when it came to that. And there is a massive learning curve when it comes to being a pitchside reporter, because you're in the thick of the action. So, you know, you're right there when anything happens. You have to be able to cope with, you know, so all of a sudden you'll see a red card and you'll have to say, oh my God, like I need to, you know, ask the manager what happened there. Did he think it was a red? Or, you know, you have to be able to ask the tough questions. And it definitely was a learning curve, and it gave me a massive admiration for people that do it on a daily basis at top level for the jobs, because at times I was worried that, oh my God, what will people think of me? You know, I don't want them to get offended by my question, and am I any good at this? Because, you know, I didn't know what I was going to be like. The only experience I had of pitchside interviews was when I was doing them as a player, not when I was actually the one asking the questions. But I suppose what I do take from it is it forced me out of my comfort zone. Again, it was another thing that I tried. And I think, you know, we're all not going to be great at everything, but the beauty of it is having the courage to try something. That's always a message I would promote. And when I work with younger people, I would always say that to them, is everyone makes mistakes, everybody fails, but failure isn't a weakness, you know, because you have the courage at least to give it a go. Like, that's something to be really proud of. If you never make a mistake, it means you've never tried something new. So I think that's far more something to be upset about than actually making a mistake. And I think I've made plenty of mistakes of pitchside reporting, but it was such an adrenaline rush, and it allowed me to still stay part of the action even though I wasn't necessarily out on the pitch.
And speaking of pressure, we're now on to photo number 3.
Yes, so speaking of comfort zones as well, actually, the photo that I've chosen is of my experience in Dancing with the Stars. So the picture I have chosen is the very first night I stepped out on the dance floor to do my first solo dance. I was in a red dress, very appropriately dancing to Rebel Rebel, and it was a tango, and it's a picture of me with my dance partner, and my back is to the camera, and obviously I've been a sports person my entire life, so I had a lot of muscle. And yes, the experience was extraordinary, but for me it really as well tested me mentally, because I suppose I have grown up, and I still have it, and I'm working on it, with this incessant need to please people. And I'm always wondering, oh, I hope people like me, and oh, what if they don't, and what if I say that and, you know, people don't respond well to it. And I think when I made the decision to go on Dancing with the Stars, I was very conscious of the fact that I was the only sportswoman to have ever been on the show, and actually still am. And I had a very different physique to the rest of the women, and I suppose I'm quite short. I'm 5'5", and I sprinted when I was younger, played camogie for years, so I have quite a lot of muscle in my body. And I remember the reaction to that picture. Loads of people were like, oh my God, look at all the muscle on your back. And I was quite insecure, very proud of it, but still quite insecure about what people would say about me. And because nobody likes to hear anything negative about themselves. And I suppose during that Dancing with the Stars experience, well, thankfully the vast majority of the comments and the feedback was really positive. You're always going to get some people that are just going to say stuff for the sake of being nasty, and I think it really kind of steeled my own mental resolve, and it made me realise that, you know, people are just going to be mean sometimes, and nothing you can do about it. But I was so proud of taking on that challenge, and I think for me it was for younger people as well, to show them, not just younger girls but younger boys too, that, you know, you don't just have to be one thing. Because, you know, up until that point I was Anna Geary, the camogie player, and then I retired, and suddenly I'm like, oh my God, what am I now? So it was showing that, you know, you can have a fierce interest in sport, but you can also love the glitz and the glam and the sparkles and the tan, and you don't have to be put in a box, you know. And especially now, like, there's such a massive dropout rate of girls in sport. I wanted to show them that they don't have to choose between, you know, being a teenage girl and wanting to go to discos and wanting to dress up and being, you know, the top of your game, or in your sports arena, or whatever your chosen sport is, that you can do both. And I would love to see more girls hanging on to their sport, because aside from the fact, for me, I learned so much about my own confidence and my own self-esteem. I also ended up helping to forge a career out of it. So it was a big decision for me to say yes to it. But I've always loved dance, so it was never a worry about, oh, I won't know how to dance, because straight away I was like, yes. But it was the worry about how I would be perceived and what people would think and say about me. That was quite a worry, but it's one of my greatest successes. Yeah. You know, and, you know, considering that I've played with Cork and I've left a career and forged a new one, it was still one of the greatest things I've ever done, because it was totally something new. I didn't know how I was going to do. I could have been hopeless, but I made the best friends after it, and I have the best memories.
I saw it and it was fantastic. Yeah. And I have a photo here which I wasn't going to bring to the table, but I've showed a few people this photo, and first thing they say to me is, wow, the dress.
I know. Like, I mean, you know,
different to a camogie kit.
For anybody, I mean, anyone that knows me knows if I could have played camogie in high heels, I would have. Because I love dressing up, and I think, to be honest with you, it's something I always joke about, as even when I speak on Instagram. You know, we all have the good clothes, the good biscuits, the good cutlery, the good room, the good couch. And I suppose I would say is wear the good clothes more often, because they'll ultimately make you feel better about yourself, you know. And I think for those 12 weeks we got to wear the most fabulous costumes. The wardrobe team, makeup and hair, they just treated us like we were royalty, and it was the opportunity to try on dresses I might never ever try on again, and dance in them, and often at times make loads of mistakes and not know what I'm doing on the dance floor. But it was just,
sure, you're having a great old time, and that's what counts.
You know what, everybody makes mistakes, and again, from sport I was really lucky that sport had taught me that even if you make a mistake, you just have to keep going. You can't give up and start and stop and say, I'm going again. You have to just keep going. And so I suppose that came easier to me than maybe some other people, but it was the best fun. And I think it just always reminded me to, sometimes you need to step out of your comfort zone and try new things, just to keep things interesting. I
think that's a key message there for anyone. And you've been a great guest as well today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the chat.
Thank you for being on the podcast. You can find the photos we discussed today on our social media pages, all at Life in a Bubble Podcast. You can also contact us at lifeinabubbledublin@gmail.com. Any messages, comments or reviews are really appreciated. So next time we'll be diving in with the past winner of Celebrity MasterChef. He's also the author of 2 successful cookbooks. He's a TV pundit and a columnist. And that's only in the past few years. Before all of that, he was a majorly successful athlete, won world and European medals, and also competed at the 2008 Olympic Games. So next time we'll be speaking to the brilliant David Gillick. Until then, take care, thanks for listening, and we'll see you when David's episode drops on April the 17th.